From a small farmer living in a remote village amid rice fields, to the most dangerous and important man in China, a young man passionate about books and reading, who turns into a revolutionary leader, leading long marches across mountains and rivers, and founding a party that would change the face of history. A man who managed to unite a fragmented nation, defeat the warlords, expel the Japanese, and crush his rivals in a bloody civil war. But behind these victories lies a massive human tragedy. During his time, between 40 to 70 million people died through famine, war, and persecution. This is the dramatic and dark story of Mao Zedong, the man who rose from the countryside to become a symbol of revolution and a tyrant, one of the most controversial rulers of the 20th century. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in the village of Shaoshan in Hunan province. He grew up in a modest peasant household. His father was strict and harsh, while his mother was religious and kind. From childhood, Mao showed a love for reading, diving into Chinese classical books as well as modern Western ideas that arrived with a wave of change. But he was born in turbulent time. China was not a unified state, but a fragmented nation. After the fall of the empire in 1911, the country entered what became known as the warlord era. During that time, China was divided into regions controlled by powerful generals. The Anhui clique, led by Duan Qirui in central China. The Jili clique, led by Cao Kun, that controlled Beijing and the north. And the Fengtian clique, led by Zhang Zulin in Manchuria in the northeast. In the south and west, smaller cliques appeared in Sichuan, Yunnan, and Guangxi. Each one ruled like a small emperor, collecting taxes and commanding a private army. China was weak, divided, and a prey to foreign intervention. In 1919, the May 4th movement erupted. Thousands of students marched in Beijing to protest the Treaty of Versailles, which gave Japan Chinese territories instead of returning them to China. For the first time, the voices of youth rose, calling for science, progress, and socialism. Mao, who was a young man at that time, was deeply influenced, and that became his political awakening. Just 2 years later, in 1921, he participated founding the Chinese Communist Party in Shanghai, with direct support from the Soviet Union through the Comintern. The goal was clear: expel imperialism, eliminate the warlords, and distribute land to the peasants. But for a weak, newly established party, China still seemed fragmented under powerful warlords. How could that be achieved? At that moment, Sun Yat-sen appeared, founder of the Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, who called for China's unity under the Soviet pressure. An unexpected alliance was formed, the Communists and the Nationalist Party side by side against the warlords. In 1926, the Northern Expedition began. For the first time, the warlords faced a united front, and just 2 years later, most of them were eliminated, and the warlord era officially came to an end. But unity did not last. In 1927, after the death of Sun Yat-sen, Chiang Kai-shek assumed leadership of the Nationalist Party, fearing the growing power of the Communists. He turned against them in the Shanghai Massacre. Thousands of Communists were killed, and Mao was forced to flee to the countryside, where he founded what became known as the Red Army, relying on marginalized peasants. Mao adopted guerrilla warfare, attacking small villages and weak centers to build a support base among the peasants. But the Nationalist Party did not leave him alone. In 1934, the Communists faced a suffocating siege. At that point, Mao decided on a legendary retreat, the Long March. More than 100,000 fighters began marching across mountains, rivers, and snow for thousands of kilometers. Only 20 to 30,000 reached the north. But despite the losses, it was a defining moment. Out of suffering, Mao emerged the undisputed leader.
The Nationalist Army of Chiang Kai-shek surrounded the Communists at their base in Jiangxi. 100,000 Communists led by Mao Zedong escaped and began a 6,000-mile trek north to establish a new camp. Walking 30 to 40 miles a day, the marchers crossed rivers, mountains, and rugged grasslands. Between 70 and 90,000 people died during the arduous journey. Despite the casualties, Mao gained many supporters along the way, thereby shifting the basis of the communist movement from urban to rural areas.
Then came the greatest threat from outside. In 1937, Japan invaded China. Horrific massacres were committed, the most infamous being the Nanjing Massacre, where more than 300,000 civilians were killed in just a few weeks. The Communists and the Nationalist Party were forced into a temporary alliance against the foreign enemy. The Communists relied on a guerrilla warfare in the countryside, while the Nationalist Party fought direct battles. With the Allied victory in World War II in 1945, the Japanese withdrew, but peace did not return to China. Instead, the Civil War erupted again. Between 1945 and 1949, the decisive confrontation broke out between the Communists and the Nationalist Party. The Soviets armed the Communists in Manchuria, while the Nationalist Party was mired in corruption and economic crisis. The two sides fought three major battles that changed the course of history: the Liaoxing Campaign, the Huaihai Campaign, and the Beijing Campaign. All ended in sweeping communist victories. The forces of the Nationalist Party collapsed, and Chiang Kai-shek fled with his government to the island of Taiwan on October 1st in 1949. Mao proclaimed in Beijing the founding of the People's Republic of China. Now Mao became the absolute ruler of more than 500 million people. He began with wide reforms, redistributing land to the peasants. Then in 1958, launched a massive project he called the Great Leap Forward. The goal was to rapidly transform China into a major industrial power. But the result was an unprecedented disaster. Agricultural production collapsed, and famine swept across the land. Estimates suggest that between 20 to 45 million people starved to death in one of the worst human catastrophes of the 20th century. Despite the disaster, Mao clung to power. In 1966, he launched what he called the Culture Revolution, a mass political campaign aimed at eliminating his rivals and consolidating his authority. Millions of young people, known as the Red Guards, attacked teachers and intellectuals. Books and relics were destroyed. Hundreds of thousands were imprisoned and persecuted, and tens of thousands were killed in utter chaos. On September 9, 1976, Mao Zedong died after ruling China for more than a quarter of a century. He left behind a controversial legacy, a hero who liberated China from imperialism and unified it after a century of chaos, and a tyrant responsible for the deaths of millions through famines, wars, and repressive policies. This is the story of a man who changed the course of China's history and turned it into a great power, but also left behind deep human wounds that will never be forgotten. Mao Zedong,
the savior of China, or its greatest catastrophe.